I like Pokemon. And if you're like me, we invest our precious time and money into things that we'll hopefully like. So when something we used to enjoy comes out with a product that is not bad, but not good enough to warrant a purchase, then indifference is created. Why buy the latest one when I didn't really care for the last games I tried out? I'd rather use my money and time on better things. And while I have no intention of buying Sword and Shield, I started wondering what sort of Pokemon game could draw me back in. What gimmick or mechanic could Game Freak's moneymaker do to change my mind? Let's talk about features and innovations within the Pokemon franchise. I asked on Twitter what were some of your favorite improvements and implementations about the games, and they usually fall within 3 groups. General quality of life changes, changes to the battle system, and ways to interact with the world and your Pokemon. What I mainly want to focus on is the third one, from having Pokemon following you around, dressing them up, to the feeding and camping aspects of the latest games. Interacting with your favorite Pokemon and how you express your love for them has always been a large appeal. So, adding to this category, I want Pokemon to be capable of misery and death, and have it impact the gameplay in a meaningful way. And I think it would be neat if Pokemon could die, and not in the Nuzlocke challenge sort of way, more like their end is inevitable. Your Pokemon will die, or retire, or whatever works best. And look, I don't want this because I'm a sadist, but because it would be interesting to see mechanics built around a Pokemon's limited time with you, and how it'll represent itself through gameplay. This mechanic could encourage proper care of one's team through long-term rewards that will delay the inevitable. It's kind of a yin and yang thing. Knowing they are capable of misery and resentment and being able to completely avoid it throughout their entire journey would be a great accomplishment. So what am I trying to say here? When we make a drastic change like this, we need to understand what is being changed and why. And one of the main reasons why Pokemon has been beloved throughout the years is catching them all. Or at the very least, catching your favorites to represent your team. And having your Pokemon die after a period of time is gonna turn away quite a few people. The introduction of a lifespan heavily goes against the collect them all mentality of the main games. But that's what spin-off games are for. They are able to explore different avenues of play within the same franchise. And personally, the added challenge of having to spend the time with your Pokemon optimally sounds great. It's partly why Nuzlocks are so captivating. Knowing one false move can make Smegmo gone forever. So, the focus of the game obviously shifts when introducing a time limit. It changes from let's have a casual time collecting Pokemon to how far can I go with my team within these time restrictions. And having limited time to complete something, knowing the inevitability of something ending, adds a stressful yet exciting pressure on the player. The clock is ticking. Use your time wisely. It's the reason why I adore the Persona games. Being given a year to juggle dungeon crawling and a social life ended up being a surprisingly engaging experience. It encourages optimal play through a mindset that rewards you for planning ahead. Beat a chapter's boss before the time limit and you're rewarded to spend your days doing whatever you want, worry-free until the next story chapter starts. The characters don't die per se, but their story has to end within the set amount of time, and how you spend the time to fill in those blanks is the main appeal of it. Also, there's a game called Monster Rancher, and in it you essentially have to raise your monster to get them into the Hall of Fame through fighting tournaments. Unlike Pokemon, there's no world to explore, so the gameplay loop is more focused on money and stat management. It's all about how you spend your days training and letting your monster climb the ranks. And for most players, monsters will usually die quickly due to suboptimal care. So, ideally, you fuse your old retired monsters together so that the next generation with higher base stats can go farther than their parents did. But well-experienced trainers can beat the game with their first generation monster. It's a simple, engaging, and very charming game. In saying that, will those game mechanics translate well into a Pokemon game? Who knows? So let's design this hypothetical Pokemon game from the ground up instead. I want to start a discussion, so feel free to destroy or improve upon whatever foundation I lay down here. So here we go. In this game where Pokemon can die or retire, two things are required to even make this mechanic an engaging and fair experience. Number 1. Defeating the Elite Four is possible without a Pokemon dying or retiring. Have the game balanced to where most players will experience a Pokemon's death on their first run, which will reward great players with the satisfaction of being able to beat the game without a Pokemon dying. Number 2. If a Pokemon does die, they should provide benefit to the next generation of younger Pokemon, so you don't have to start from square one. Such as dead Pokemon can leave behind a gift that can be given to other Pokemon to increase their stat gains or level up quicker, or like retired Pokemon can teach moves and train other Pokemon in the daycare. So, what other mechanics will be present to build upon this foundation of a Pokemon's lifespan? Here are some ideas. Dying and retiring are both mechanics that could exist in the game, with retired Pokemon being the normal route, whereas death is done through sheer, repeated incompetence. Lifespan counts down similar to that of a hatching egg, through footsteps. Should you walk back to the Pokemon Center to heal, knowing your Pokemon will lose some lifespan, or keep going at the risk of him fainting, losing even more lifespan? Have Pokemon be capable of misery. The more miserable they are, the quicker their lifespan depletes per footstep. So, in turn, we create mechanics that encourage proper care through long-term rewards, enticing players to treat Pokemon better. Like, Pokemon who travel together bond with each other that improves their performance. Or something drastic like evolution is based on footsteps, which means a Pokemon could die or retire if they're miserable enough before evolving, even if they are high-leveled through short, intense training. Just because it's high-leveled doesn't mean it has lived long. And what about short-term benefits? They can be balanced with long-term penalties alongside other features to discourage players from experiencing Pokemon misery. Such as feeding food they dislike increases misery despite the buffs the food itself provides. One-hit KOs will greatly increase their misery. And if miserable enough after retiring, the Pokemon won't allow you to play with them out of sheer resentment. Now, in this hypothetical game, your starting town is in the middle of the entire map, which means you can go to any of the gyms from the start, with every one getting subsequently harder with every badge. Gyms can also be fought at any difficulty to train new Pokemon. HMs are not required to beat the game, but can be used to unlock secret optional areas for new items, Pokemon, and moves. Less time meandering and more time focusing on your Pokemon and where you think it's best for them to go, which means you can infinitely replay the game from start to finish with any Pokemon, after you've explored and completed the region for the first time. Oh, and different Pokemon have different lifespans across a bell curve, providing options for players who wish to take on more difficult challenges on other playthroughs. And finally, here are some other smaller things that you can read. So yeah, that's all I really got down. As I said previously, feel free to build upon or tear down this idea entirely. I propose this only because it's just fun to think about. Pokemon has more or less been the same with every installment, with a few gimmicks thrown here and there to spice it up a bit. It's a likable franchise that, unfortunately, hasn't evolved alongside my tastes, which is fine. But hey, as long as they're putting out a decent game for their intended audience, I don't care. So while Giant Pokemon isn't enough for me to care about their latest game, maybe knowing I have limited time with my starter will do the job.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,